Continuing this mini-series on a simple approach to playing bass guitar, let's take a look at some arpeggio-based blues bassline patterns. In the last lesson, we used this commonly used bassline pattern, which I described as a 1-3-5-6 pattern because it uses the notes 1, 3, 5 and 6 from the major scale relative to the root note of the chord we're playing under, in this case A. These notes come straight out of a major sixth arpeggio. But when we're playing blues, we're generally working over a set of dominant seventh chords. So I think it's a fair question to ask, why use a major sixth arpeggio under a dominant seventh chord? And the answer lies in the fact that harmonies generally sound richer when they contain a bit of contrast. Say I'm strumming an A seventh chord, something like this, over a bass line that contains only the same notes as are contained within the chord. In this case, 1, 3, 5, flat 7. Sounds okay, but I think you agree it's almost too good a fit. Because essentially we're just both playing the same bunch of notes. Now if I change to playing 1, 3, 5, 6, it's a subtle change, but I think you can hear the contrast between what you're hearing from the bass and what you're hearing from the acoustic guitar provides a bit more structural strength. When you study music theory, one of the things you learn is just which notes you can mix together in this way and which notes you can't. And of all the notes, the sixth is probably one of the easiest to add to a chord without in any way affecting its tonality or functionality. And this makes the major sixth arpeggio quite a versatile source of bass lines in most forms of music. So here are a few ways we might string these notes together to make the sort of bass lines that you commonly hear in blues tunes. So starting with our 1, 3, 5, 6. One of the first things we might do is just drop the third out and go 1, 5, 6, 5. Or we might reverse the order and go 1, 6, 5, 3. Or mix the notes up 1, 5, 3, 6. We might simply mess around with the rhythm. Instead of playing it straight 1, 3, 5, 6, we might put a break in. Double up the notes. Or generally sort of mess around with it. All kinds of permutations. There are endless possible ways of combining these notes, so why not pause the video now and have a go yourself and see what you come up with. Now, as well as using the major sixth arpeggio to play a bass line supporting a dominant seventh chord, we can also simply add the sixth note of the scale to the dominant seventh arpeggio. And this approach gives us one of the most commonly used 2-bar long bass lines in blues. So this one, the formula for this one is 1, 3, 5, 6, flat 7, 6, 5, 3. The only thing to look out for here is that being a 2-bar bass line, we sometimes have to modify it when we come to the last line of a typical 12-bar blues. This is where we're used to changing chords every bar. So over the first line, I can use the 2-bar long bass line twice. Then for the second line, simply move the same idea up to root it on the D for the D7th chords. And then back to A for the A7th for the two bars of A7th. But then you can see we have just 1 bar of E7th, so we can't play a 2-bar long riff over that. One nice simple way of coping with this is simply to play the first half of the bass line, so that's just 1, 3, 5, 6 over the E7th, and then take the same idea down to the D root for the D7th, and then back to the 2-bar bass line over the A7th. So our last line would read like this. A slightly harder to play, but I think more interesting sounding solution is to split the 2-bar bass line between the 2 chords E7th and D7th in this case. So we play the first half of the line from the E, followed by the second half of the line relative to the D. So I've got to locate that note as being the flat 7th relative to D, and then come back down the bass line like that, and then we'd be back to A for our full 2-bar bass line. So the last line would sound like this. There are, of course, many other possible solutions, and experimenting with different approaches, using your ears to judge the results, is what I'd recommend to you to best help you develop this particular element of your bass playing. I'll leave you to experiment with all these ideas for now. Do let me know what you come up with. Then in the next lesson, we'll take a look at using the octave as a framework for creating some more bass blues lines, or some blues bass lines even. I'll see you then.